The phone slipped from Blake's hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor of his small Brooklyn apartment. The hotel manager's voice still echoed in his ears. "We don't host same-sex weddings. It's policy." His heart plummeted, a sickening mix of rage and disbelief churning in his chest. Blake had spent months planning this wedding, their wedding. He and Ethan had dreamed of saying their vows at the historic Grandview Hotel, a stunning venue perched on the cliffs of Maine, its white columns and sprawling gardens the perfect backdrop for their love. They'd toured the place last spring, Blake's fingers intertwined with Ethan's as they imagined their first dance under the stars. The manager had been all smiles then, never hinting at the bombshell that would drop now, 6 months later, with deposits paid and invitations sent. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his dark hair, his green eyes staring blankly at the vision board pinned to the wall, swatches of navy and gold, Polaroids of him and Ethan laughing, a sketch of the cake they'd chosen. Ethan was still at work, blissfully unaware that their dream was unraveling. Blake's chest tightened. How could he tell the man he loved that the place they'd chosen to celebrate their commitment had just slammed the door in their faces? The Grandview wasn't just any venue. It held a piece of Blake's heart, tied to memories of his grandmother, Eleanor. She'd taken him there as a kid, her warm hand guiding him through the gardens while she spun stories of her own wedding decades ago. "This place is magic, Blake," she'd said, her eyes twinkling. "One day, you'll make your own magic here." Eleanor had passed 2 years ago, but her words lingered, making the hotel's rejection feel like a betrayal of her memory too. Blake's phone buzzed, snapping him back to reality. A text from Ethan. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." The words should have warmed him, but instead, they felt like a weight. He couldn't let Ethan down, not after everything they'd been through. Their love story hadn't been easy. Blake, a graphic designer with a quiet intensity, had grown up in a small Ohio town where being openly gay wasn't an option. He'd spent his teenage years hiding, his heart racing every time he stole a glance at a boy. Ethan, a high school English teacher with a contagious laugh, had his own scars, disowned by his religious parents when he came out at 18. They'd met 3 years ago at a Brooklyn bookshop, bonding over dog-eared copies of Whitman and Baldwin. Their first date lasted 6 hours, ending with a kiss under a flickering street lamp. From that moment, Blake knew Ethan was his home. But now this. Blake stood, pacing the apartment, his mind racing. He could sue the hotel, but that would take months, maybe years, and their wedding was in 3 months. He could find another venue, but nothing matched the Grandview's significance. Or he could fight, really fight, to make the hotel honor their booking. His jaw clenched. He wasn't one to back down, not when it came to Ethan, not when it came to their love. The door clicked open, and Ethan stepped inside, his brown eyes bright until they landed on Blake's face. "Babe, what's wrong?" he asked, dropping his bag. Blake hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. But there was no hiding from Ethan. He crossed the room, took Ethan's hands, and spilled the truth. Ethan's face fell, but then his expression hardened, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "They can't do this to us," he said. "We're getting married there, Blake. I don't care what it takes." That night, they sat on the couch, laptops open, searching for legal loopholes, public pressure tactics, anything to fight back. Blake's mind drifted to Eleanor again. She'd been his biggest supporter, the one who'd hugged him tightly when he came out, whispering, "Love is love, my boy." If she were here, she'd be leading the charge. He could almost hear her voice, urging him to stand tall. As they scrolled through articles about discrimination laws, Blake's phone pinged with an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Regarding your Grandview reservation." His heart skipped. He opened it, scanning the words. "Dear Mr. Carter, I represent the estate of Eleanor Carter. I have information about a reservation made in your name at the Grandview Hotel." Blake froze. "Eleanor? A reservation?" His hands trembled as he read on, the words blurring into a revelation that would change everything. The email glowed on Blake's screen, each word a spark igniting hope and confusion. "Your grandmother, Eleanor Carter, secured a reservation for a wedding at the Grandview Hotel in your name over a decade ago." Blake's breath caught. A decade ago? He'd been a teenager, barely out to himself, let alone to Eleanor. How could she have known? Ethan leaned over, his shoulder brushing Blake's as he read the email aloud. "It says she paid for a full wedding package, venue, catering, even a band, for a date she left open, to be claimed by you when you were ready. His voice softened, tinged with awe. Blake, she knew you'd want this place. She planned for it. Blake's eyes stung. Eleanor had always been a step ahead, her love a quiet force that saw him before he saw himself. The email, from a lawyer named Margaret Voss, explained that Eleanor had set up a trust to cover the costs, with strict instructions to keep it secret until Blake attempted to book the Grandview himself. She believed in your future, Margaret wrote. She wanted you to have the wedding of your dreams. But the email also carried a warning. The hotel's current management may not honor the reservation due to their policies. You'll need to present the original contract in person. Blake's jaw tightened. So, Eleanor's gift was real, but the fight wasn't over. The hotel's discriminatory policies still stood in their way, and now it felt personal, not just a slight against him and Ethan, but against his grandmother's legacy. The next morning, Blake and Ethan drove to Maine, the 6-hour trip a blur of coffee stops and tense silence. The Grandview loomed ahead as they pulled into the gravel drive, its white facade gleaming under the autumn sun. Blake clutched the printed contract from Eleanor's trust, its edges worn but the words clear, a binding agreement for a wedding in his name. Ethan squeezed his hand. "We've got this," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in Blake's chest. Inside, the lobby smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, just as Blake remembered from his childhood visits. The manager, a stern woman named Carla with a tight bun and a pinched smile, greeted them coolly. "Mr. Carter, I've already explained our policy," she said, barely glancing at the contract. "This document is outdated. Our ownership changed 5 years ago, and we don't accommodate," she paused, choosing her words, "certain types of events." Blake's blood boiled, but Ethan spoke first, his tone calm but sharp. "This is a legal contract, signed and paid for. You can't just dismiss it." Carla's eyes narrowed, but she took the papers, flipping through them with a frown. "I'll need to consult our legal team," she said finally, disappearing into a back office. As they waited, Blake's mind wandered to Eleanor's stories. She'd married his grandfather at the Grandview in 1962, a time when her own interracial marriage had raised eyebrows. "Love always finds a way," she told him, her voice fierce. Now, standing in the same place, Blake felt her strength fueling him. He wouldn't let her down. Carla returned, her expression unreadable. "The contract appears valid, but our policy stands. We'll refund the deposit from the trust." Blake's heart sank, but before he could respond, a voice interrupted from behind. "That contract is ironclad, Carla. You'd do well to honor it." They turned to see an older man, silver hair framing a weathered face, standing in the doorway. He introduced himself as Henry Voss, Margaret's father and the lawyer who drafted Eleanor's trust. "I was a friend of your grandmother's," he said to Blake, his eyes kind but resolute. "She made me promise to see this through." Henry's presence shifted the room's energy. Carla hesitated, her confidence wavering. "Mr. Voss, our policy," she began, but Henry cut her off. "Your policy violates state law. Maine legalized same-sex marriage in 2012, and discrimination based on sexual orientation is illegal. Shall we discuss this with the press?" The threat hung heavy. Carla's face paled, and she excused herself to make a call. Blake's pulse raced. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of victory. Ethan's hand found his, their fingers lacing together, a silent vow to fight on. But as they stepped outside to wait, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Maine wind whipped across the Grandview's cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and pine as Blake and Ethan stood outside, waiting for Carla's decision. Blake's mind churned, replaying Henry's words. The lawyer's sudden appearance felt like Eleanor herself reaching through time, but the hotel's resistance was a wall they hadn't expected. Ethan leaned against him, his warmth a quiet anchor. "Whatever happens, we're doing this together," he murmured. Blake nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. What if the contract wasn't enough? Henry joined them, his briefcase clutched tightly. "Eleanor was a force," he said, his voice softening. "When she made this reservation, she told me she saw something special in you, Blake. She knew you'd find someone worth fighting for." Blake's throat tightened. He'd always thought Eleanor's love was unconditional, but this was proof she believed in his future even before he did. Carla emerged, her face a mask of forced politeness. The owners have agreed to honor the contract, she said, her voice clipped. You can have the venue, but we'll need to finalize details quickly. Blake's heart leapt, but her tone held an edge, a warning that this concession wasn't the end of their resistance. Ethan squeezed his hand, his eyes shining with cautious hope. We did it, he whispered. But the victory felt fragile. As they drove back to Brooklyn, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that the hotel's grudging agreement hid something deeper. Ethan, ever the optimist, scrolled through their wedding Pinterest board, suggesting new ideas for the ceremony. We could do fairy lights in the garden, he said, his voice bright. Blake smiled, but his mind was elsewhere, tangled in the memory of Carla's cold stare. Back home, they dove into planning, but the joy was tempered by whispers of trouble. Blake's friend Mia, a wedding planner with a knack for gossip, called with a tip. I heard the Grandview's owners are hardcore traditionalists, she said. They're not happy about this. Be careful. Blake's stomach twisted. He didn't tell Ethan, not wanting to dim his excitement, but the warning lingered. Days later, an anonymous email arrived, its subject line chilling. You're not welcome here. The message was short, venomous. The Grandview isn't for people like you. Back off, or you'll regret it. Blake's hands shook as he deleted it, but the words burned into his mind. He told Ethan, who insisted on reporting it to the police. The officer they spoke to was sympathetic but unhelpful, citing the email's anonymity. We'll keep an eye out, he said, but Blake felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't since his Ohio days. Determined to protect their dream, Blake reached out to Henry Voss again. The lawyer invited them to his office in Portland, a cozy space filled with legal books and photos of him with Eleanor. She was a strategist, Henry said, handing Blake a folder. She left you more than a reservation. Inside were letters Eleanor had written to Blake, sealed and dated years ago. One read, My dearest Blake, love is a battle worth fighting. Never let anyone dim your light. The words ignited something in Blake. He and Ethan began rallying support, reaching out to local LGBTQ+ organizations and allies. A journalist friend, Sam, offered to write an article about their story, hoping public pressure would keep the hotel in check. The piece went viral, sparking a wave of support online. Hashtags like #LoveWins@Grandview trended, and messages poured in from strangers cheering them on. But the backlash was swift. The hotel's social media pages were flooded with hateful comments, some echoing the anonymous email's threats. Blake's phone buzzed constantly with notifications, some encouraging, others vile. Ethan, usually unflappable, grew quiet, his smiles rarer. One night, as they lay in bed, he admitted, I'm scared, Blake. Not of us, but of what they might do. Blake pulled him close, his own fear mirrored in Ethan's eyes. We're stronger than they are, he said, his voice fierce. Eleanor's with us. We're not backing down. But as he held Ethan, Blake couldn't ignore the growing sense that their fight was about to get uglier. The viral article turned Blake and Ethan's wedding into a cause, but it also painted a target on their backs. Their inbox overflowed with messages, some filled with love, others dripping with hate. Blake tried to shield Ethan from the worst, deleting threats before he could see them, but the strain was wearing them down. One night, Ethan caught him, his voice sharp. Stop hiding things from me, Blake. We're in this together. Blake nodded, guilt twisting in his gut. He couldn't protect Ethan from everything, but he'd try. Their allies grew stronger. A local activist group, Equality Maine, organized a rally outside the Grandview, demanding the hotel uphold its commitment. Blake and Ethan joined, standing hand in hand as supporters waved rainbow flags and chanted for love. The crowd's energy was electric, but Blake noticed Carla watching from the hotel steps, her face unreadable. Later, she called to confirm the booking but added, We're complying, but don't expect special treatment. Her words stung, but Blake held his tongue. They'd won this round. Planning resumed, but obstacles kept surfacing. The hotel's preferred vendors, florists, caterers, photographers, began canceling, citing scheduling conflicts. Mia, their planner, sniffed out the truth. The vendors were being pressured by the hotel's owners. This is sabotage, she said, slamming her laptop shut. Blake's anger flared, but Ethan's calm resolve steadied him. We'll find new vendors, Ethan said. Better ones. They did, with help from their growing community. A queer-owned bakery in Portland offered a stunning 3-tiered cake, and a photographer friend volunteered to capture their day. But the stress was relentless. Blake woke from nightmares of the wedding falling apart, Ethan's face fading into darkness. He clung to Eleanor's letters, reading them late at night when Ethan slept. Her words, "Love is a battle worth fighting," became his mantra. One afternoon, Henry Voss called with news. "I found something in Eleanor's files," he said. "She didn't just book the venue. She bought a stake in the Grandviews holding company years ago. It's small, but it gives you leverage." Blake's mind reeled. Eleanor had been a silent investor? Henry explained that her shares could influence the hotel's board, especially if paired with public pressure. "You could force a policy change," he said. Blake and Ethan met Henry at a cafe to strategize. The plan was bold: present Eleanor's shares at the next board meeting, demand the hotel reverse its discriminatory policy, and threaten legal action if they refused. It was risky, the board could dig in, and the wedding was only 6 weeks away. But Blake felt Eleanor's fire in him. "Let's do it," he said, Ethan nodding beside him. The board meeting was held in a sleek Portland office, the air thick with tension. Blake stood, contract and shares in hand, his voice steady as he recounted their story: the hotel's refusal, Eleanor's legacy, their right to love. Ethan added, "This isn't just about us. It's about every couple who's been told their love doesn't belong." The board members shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact. One, an older woman named Diane, spoke up. "I knew Eleanor. She'd be proud of you." But not everyone was swayed. The board's chair, a gruff man named Richard, dismissed their claims. "The hotel's policy reflects our values," he said. Blake's heart sank, but Henry stepped in, brandishing legal documents. "Eleanor's shares give Blake a vote, and Maine law is clear: discrimination won't stand." The room fell silent. Richard adjourned the meeting, promising a decision soon. As they left, Blake felt a mix of hope and dread. The fight was bigger than their wedding now. It was about dismantling a system that rejected love like theirs. That night, Ethan pulled Blake into a slow dance in their living room. No music, just their heartbeats. "We're going to win," Ethan whispered. Blake wanted to believe him, but the threats, the sabotage, and the board's resistance loomed large. The board's decision came a week later, delivered in a curt email. The hotel would host Blake and Ethan's wedding, but the discriminatory policy would remain. It was a half-victory, bitter and incomplete. Blake stared at the screen, his hands clenched. "They're letting us into safe face," he said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we make them change the policy. For everyone." Their fight became a movement. Equality Maine organized more rallies, and Sam's articles kept the story alive, drawing national attention. Celebrities tweeted support, and a petition to change the Grandviews policy gained thousands of signatures. Blake and Ethan spoke at events, their voices growing stronger with each appearance. But the threats didn't stop. A brick was thrown through their apartment window one night, a note tied to it: "Leave Maine." Blake's heart pounded as he swept up the glass, Ethan's arms around him. "We can't let them win," Ethan said, his voice shaking but resolute. Henry dug deeper into Eleanor's shares, uncovering a clause that allowed Blake to call a special board meeting. They planned it for 2 weeks before the wedding, a last-ditch effort to force change. Blake spent sleepless nights preparing, memorizing laws, practicing his speech. Ethan, meanwhile, kept their wedding plans on track, his optimism a lifeline. "We're getting married, no matter what," he told Blake, kissing his forehead. The meeting was a battlefield. Richard, the board chair, scoffed as Blake presented his case, but Diane and 2 other members listened intently. Blake's voice trembled at first, but grew steady as he spoke of Eleanor's belief in love, of the couples who'd be turned away if the policy stood. Ethan stood beside him, sharing their story, their love, their pain, their hope. Diane's eyes glistened. "I moved to amend the policy," she said, her voice firm. The vote was close, but it passed, 4-3. The room erupted in cheers from supporters who'd packed the gallery. Blake and Ethan embraced, tears streaming down their faces. The policy was gone, but the wedding was days away, and the hotel staff remained frosty. Carla, though compliant, assigned them a junior coordinator who fumbled details. Flowers arrived late, the menu was wrong, and the band canceled at the last minute. Blake's frustration boiled over, but Ethan's calm voice pulled him back. "We've got this," he said. "We've got us. With me as help, They scrambled to fix the chaos. A friend's band stepped in, and local vendors rallied to replace what the hotel botched. The community's support was overwhelming. Strangers sent gifts, offered services, even flew in to attend. Blake felt Eleanor's presence in every gesture, her love woven into the fabric of their fight. The night before the wedding, Blake found another of Eleanor's letters in the folder Henry had given him. It read, "Blake, your heart is your greatest strength. Let it lead you." He showed it to Ethan, who smiled softly. "She's here with us," he said. They fell asleep holding each other, the weight of the past months lifting, if only for a moment. The wedding day dawned bright, the Grandview's gardens alive with color. Blake stood at the mirror, adjusting his tie, his heart racing. Ethan knocked, slipping into the room, his charcoal suit hugging his frame. "You look perfect," Ethan said, his eyes warm. Blake pulled him close, their lips meeting in a quiet promise. Whatever happened today, they'd face it together. But as guests began arriving, Blake overheard a staff member muttering about those people ruining the hotel's reputation. His stomach churned. The fight wasn't over, not yet. The Grandview's gardens glowed under the September sun, fairy lights twinkling as Blake and Ethan stood at the altar, hands clasped. Blake's navy blazer caught the light, his green eyes locked on Ethan's, whose warm smile radiated strength. The crowd, friends, family, allies, strangers who'd become family through their fight, watched in reverent silence. The officiant, a close friend named Lila, began. "Today, we celebrate not just love, but courage." Her words carried weight, a nod to the battle Blake and Ethan had fought to stand here. Blake's throat tightened as he glanced at the empty chair reserved for Eleanor, a single white rose resting on it. She was here, he knew, in every beat of his heart. Their vows were raw, honest. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady. "Blake, you showed me what it means to fight for love, to stand tall when the world pushes back. I promise to be your home, always." Blake's eyes shimmered as he replied, "Ethan, you're my strength, my light. I promise to love you fiercely, no matter what comes." The crowd erupted as they kissed, a cheer that echoed across the cliffs. The reception was a blur of laughter, music, and dancing under the stars. Mia had worked miracles, transforming the sabotaged plans into a night of magic. The Queer-owned bakery's cake was a masterpiece. The band played their favorite songs, and Sam's camera captured every moment. But the undercurrent of tension lingered. Blake noticed Carla's absence, and some staff shot cold glances. During a quiet moment, Diane, the board member, approached. "I've been talking to the others," she said. "We're pushing for new management. This place needs to live up to Eleanor's vision." Blake nodded, gratitude swelling. The fight had changed more than just their wedding. It had shifted the Grandview's future. As the night wound down, Blake and Ethan slipped away to the cliff's edge, the ocean crashing below. Ethan wrapped his arms around Blake, his breath warm against his neck. "We did it," he whispered. Blake smiled, Eleanor's words echoing in his mind. Love always finds a way. In the weeks that followed, the Grandview's owners announced a full policy overhaul, spurred by public pressure and Diane's leadership. Blake and Ethan's story inspired other couples, and the hotel became a beacon for inclusive love. They returned to Brooklyn, their love stronger, their scars a testament to their resilience. Eleanor's final letter, found tucked in Blake's suit pocket after the wedding, read, "My boy, your love is a revolution. Keep shining." Blake framed it, hanging it beside their wedding photo. Their fight had been for them, for Eleanor, for every couple told their love didn't belong. And in that fight, they'd found not just victory, but meaning, a love that changed the world, one vow at a time.